So it seems like I'm just one of many people who are bothered by this whole picking Maddie up from school narrative. There's so many problems with it, and I think it's one of the things that frequently gets discussed in my comment sections on my videos. So I wanted to really dig into this a little bit and try and figure out if it was just a big act by Jenn, if the whole point of the whole of her going to pick Maddie up from school was to be seen going to pick Maddie up from school, hence the need to be at the front of the line so that as more people as possible could see her, etc. So I've got a number of clips to go through, and then I've also got various excerpts from school information booklets and also from the school newsletter, which may help us understand things a little bit more. I also want to shout out to one of my subscribers who explained the system with the car lines a little bit more for me, although I'm still hoping that a few people can help me out a little bit more as well. So again, before I jump in, I just want to give a huge thank you to all my subscribers. You guys are so fantastic. Everyone who are just really putting thoughtful comments below my videos. I'm really enjoying reading them, and it really is getting me thinking quite a lot. So you guys are doing a fantastic job. And of course, a thank you to everyone who's bought me super thanks, people who bought me coffees, and to people who have joined my channel as members. I will be doing a pre-Christmas giveaway for my members as a thank you, and I will be putting information up for them soon. But enough of that, let's jump into this video and really start having a look at this whole picking Maddie up from school scenario. Now, if you've watched my timelines, you're going to be very, very familiar with these maps. These are basically the tower dumps. So what this map here shows us is Jenn on location at the school. Now, obviously, it's basically showing the phone in range. So we know that she arrived at around 5 minutes to 3. The exact time is actually on the timeline documents, but let's just go with that for now. So she was within range of the school from 5 minutes to 3, and then at 4:13 she was also in range. Now, she said she left at 4:10. Surveillance information from the documents say she left at 4:10. Yolanda's office was within a couple of blocks of the school, so it's possible that the reason it's still showing here on the tower dump is that she was still in the vicinity of the school for 3 minutes heading towards Yolanda's office. But this map shows us that she definitely did go to the school. She was there for the period of time that she claimed she was there, and she had Maddie's phone with her at the time. So I thought it was important to look at that first so that we can see that she definitely did do the whole school pickup thing. There is solid proof here of her having done so. Now, I probably should have mentioned also, if you are not familiar with these maps, the pale blue is Jenn's phone, the purple is Maddie's phone.
I was sitting in on that meeting. In that meeting, they approved that switch and she got switched over. I heard a little bit about her background in terms of having ADHD, a lot of problems with focus that affects her schoolwork and grades. and then some mental health concerns in terms of a lot of anxiety and panic attacks. So from there, I have been doing ongoing check-ins with her throughout the school year thus far.
So the biggest issue that many of us have had is the fact that Jen was happy to sit there and wait for an entire hour, and then when school gets out at 4 minutes past 4, she waits 6 minutes and then leaves. So there's a few videos or a few clips like what I've just played that demonstrate the multiple reasons that Maddie could have been late coming out to the car line. You have the counsellor here who has said Maddie has ADHD, she has anxiety issues. I've touched base with her a number of times this year. Jen knows this because this counsellor has made contact with Jen. So, as a parent, if your child is late coming out, wouldn't you think, A, your child has ADHD, maybe she got sidelined. Heck, I have ADHD. Trust me, the number of times I got home late because my friends and I were distracted by something after school, or we made a slight detour on the way home after school, because that's what you do when you have ADHD. You don't necessarily remember what you meant to be doing, you act impulsively. I'm sure Maddie has done that in the past. I'm sure she hasn't always been the first kid out of school. Moving on to the anxiety thing and touching base with her. Well, Jen knows about the anxiety as well. She knows that this teacher has been working with Maddie. So wouldn't you think, oh well, perhaps this teacher could be catching up with Maddie briefly after class. Maybe something happened in class and Maddie had a panic attack. Maybe I should park the car and go inside and make sure she's okay. So that's just from listening to one teacher. This is the counsellor.
When she has come to me, it's often been those feelings of panic. She's come to me like in the middle of class or during lunchtime just feeling really panicked, kind of heavy breathing, feeling really overwhelmed. And when we've had our conversations about, well, what's going on, what's making you feel this way, I've gotten responses saying, well, it's my anxiety, sometimes I don't know, I'm just really overstimulated with all the noise in the cafeteria.
So this is the same teacher again talking about Maddie having those times when she just had panic attacks. Triggers being the classroom and in the cafeteria. Now, I've actually spoken about this in other videos, and it's my belief that Maddie is triggered in situations where she's overstimulated. After school would be one of those situations when there is just a sea of students all heading for the buses, the bus line, etc. Meaning that it's quite possible that it could have been quite normal for her to hang back a bit leaving school, to let the bulk of the crowd go and not be in amongst all that. But it's also possible for her to have a panic attack directly at the end of the day because of all that chaos. And I think that historically, had they asked Jen, had they known what to ask and asked Jen about instances where Maddie had been late after school, then she probably would have been able to tell them various times that Maddie had been late out to the pickup line. So this is a child with a history of panic attacks a history of needing to go to the counsellor when she had a panic attack, a child who is triggered by situations where it is chaotic and noisy, and you only waited 6 minutes in the bus line and then decided that she wasn't coming. Don't forget, we've been told that this counsellor has had communications with Jenn over Maddie's issues and has encouraged Maddie to discuss her issues with Jenn. Jenn doesn't know her daughter well enough to consider that maybe her daughter's having a panic attack somewhere. Or maybe something happened heading out of the classroom and Maddie hung back because it made her anxious.
Nope, I've never really had issues. I've always a very anxious type of student.
Okay.
So anytime she needed to ask me something, or if she felt like something was wrong, she always wanted to bring her friends with her. She always needed like a buddy system with her to kind of huddle in, and they would be like asking the question for her.
Now, we've heard this a few times where teachers have basically said that they are used to Maddie hanging out with this particular group of girls and that they are together to the extent where these girls will go with Maddie to ask permission for Maddie to go to the nurse, and they will ask if they can accompany Maddie to the nurse. Let's be realistic here. Teenage girls do flock together a lot of the time. I used to wait for a particular friend and walk home with that friend after school. So if she was late, I was late. Now, obviously, there's a system at the school where kids who are walking are dismissed at a different time from kids who are going on the bus, as are kids who are going on the bus line. But I would expect that there would be at least one friend that Maddie would be walking out with. Which brings up two things here. Could there be a delay with that friend coming out? Could it be that they are so deeply engrossed in conversation that they are dawdling? And teenage girls do that. Now, you hear about Maddie and her best friend being really close. So close that they communicate before school. Now, it took Jenn till 4:30 to ring this friend. My first thought would be, Jenn supposedly is the one who picks Maddie up nearly every day. Jenn would know which friend that Maddie would walk out to the car line with. Wouldn't you ring that friend and say, where are you guys? Rather than sit there for a mere 6 minutes and then drive away. But Jenn doesn't say that she did this. Jenn waits 6 minutes, she drives away, she goes to her mother's office, she fuddle-duddles around for 20 minutes before thinking, oh, I might ring Maddie's best friend. I don't buy it.
There were some times, like, we do some testing in the beginning of the year, like fitness testing.
Okay.
And she was running and she was telling me, I can't do it. And I was like, that's okay. Like, do you need to get your inhaler? And she was like, yes. So I walked her to the locker room.
Okay.
We got her inhaler, and then I just told her, like, it's okay to sit out. Like, you don't have to, run crazy.
Now, I'm curious to know the extent of Maddie's asthma. Has she had severe asthma attacks in the past? Because if that were the case, you have a child who suffers from asthma to the extent that she needed to go get her puffer during a PE lesson, which she probably should have had it with her during the PE lesson, but let's not go there. So you have a child who has had issues with her asthma. She could have been inside the school somewhere in the nurse's office having an asthma attack. Did that occur to Jenn? Nah. Clearly not a problem. 6 minutes, kid's not there, I'm leaving.
Have you seen any recent changes in her behavior?
Not really.
Okay.
She always just hangs around those girls.
So again, we have another teacher identifying the fact that Maddie is always hanging around with the same group of girls. This is a child who suffers with anxiety, who would be so reliant on having her friends around for emotional support. So you would expect her to be walking out to the car line with at least one of those friends, perhaps. Yet, this is not something that occurred to Jenn to follow up instead of just driving off. I don't understand why a parent wouldn't try and ring one of those friends while still at the school. Not to mention try to ring the school or park their car and go into the school. It just does not make sense. The only reason I can think of for Jenn leaving after 6 minutes is that she knew that Maddie was not coming out.
She was on my door decorating team.
So I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but she's been in your class since fall.
Since the beginning of the year,
Fall
yes,
of 23,
August.
and then, okay,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
She was on my door decorating team. She was
Okay.
actually chosen to be my student of the week from 2 weeks ago for helping us win our door decorating competition with our friends.
Okay.
And she came before school and after school a couple times for that event, which was 1 week.
Okay.
So when Maddie was on that door decorating team, she was going and doing it after school, which meant that Jenn was picking her up late on those days. Now, does that mean, I'm sure that it wouldn't have been a particularly long period of time that she was decorating the door after school. There are certain limits, obviously, as to how long kids can hang around after school. Now, surely Jenn was waiting on those days to pick Maddie up. Or did she come to the school and park and wait knowing that Maddie was going to be a bit later out? But the point I'm making here is that there is a past history, and a somewhat recent one at that, of Maddie having extracurricular activities after school. So wouldn't that be something that would come to mind pretty quickly? We're talking only a few weeks earlier that Maddie had been staying after school a few times to help with door decorating. So wouldn't your first thought be, oh, I wonder if she's doing something like that again and she forgot to tell me? Not, oh well, 6 minutes are gone, there's other people in the queue, I'm going to go. That's complete utter BS. I mean, what is wrong with this woman? Either she's just so incredibly dense and incapable of logic, or she knew that Maddie wasn't coming out.
She's very quiet, reserved. She looks sad quite often.
Okay.
Has like even on day on your assignment, like to redirect her within a very short amount of time, she's lost focus again. She'll have her head down. She's often in the clinic, whether she was in my 3rd period or currently in my 6th period. She's oftentimes in the clinic.
Okay. And what's that for, usually?
Either she's not feeling well or she has anxiety.
Now, I'm not sure if it's policy or anything for a school to notify a parent when a child's been in the clinic. Just to say, you know, your child came here today because they were unwell or because they were feeling anxious. But either way, What we have here is an established pattern of Maddie in the final period of the day needing to go to the clinic because she claims she's feeling ill or she's feeling anxious. Now, surely, if Maddie hadn't communicated that to Jenn, one of this teacher should have done so. The point I'm making here is that you have a child who supposedly frequently goes to the clinic at the end of the day because she's feeling unwell. Could that be a cause for her being delayed in getting out? Now, just going down that track, one of the conversations that was had when they were asking Jenn about tracking Maddie's period, she said she did so because Maddie had some difficult periods, meaning she had issues with period pain. Sorry, any guys that are listening, you're just going to have to put up with this girl talk right now. I don't know about other people, but I can say from my experience that as a teenager there were times when period pain was so intense that I could not move. Jenn's acknowledged that Maddie was having issues with that. We know that there was some sort of delay with Maddie. She hadn't had her period that month. She could have been in the nurse's office, doubled over in pain. Or she could have just gone to the nurse's office, as she so frequently does, and been in the nurse's office unwell. But clearly, even though that was a regular occurrence, that didn't occur to Jenn. I mean, yeah, perhaps the times when Maddie headed to the nurse's office. Now, we know that that would have been an avoidance thing, saying she was unwell quite often because of anxiety, whether or not she did feel unwell or not, and that quite likely at the end of the day she did still leave at the same time. But it's definitely something that should have been there in Jenn's mind. This child who had issues with anxiety, who needed to go to the nurse's office frequently. Wouldn't you be concerned about your child and want to make sure that she's not in the nurse's office before you drive off 6 minutes after the bell?
What about her grades? How have they been?
So all year they've been DF.
Okay.
And in the past, like she wouldn't do all of her assignments, but like every couple of assignments she would do one. But lately, since moving into my 6th period, she hasn't. There might be 1 or 2 assignments that she completed since moving into my 6th period till now.
Okay. Have you talked to her about it, or
I do. I meet with her weekly. Like, hey, how's your assignments going? She's like, I'm working on them.
Now, you have a teacher here who is proactively trying to encourage Maddie to get her assignments in. Personally, her approach, I think, wasn't so great, but the point is here that she's saying that she did regularly check in with Maddie to find out how she was going with her assignments. This is a teacher who had Maddie in the final lesson for the day. Now, when you're a teacher, you are super busy. You don't have time to be running around the school looking for a particular student. You're not going to call that student over the PA just to ask them how their assignments are going. So when are you going to check in with them? Possibly during class, if your class is settled enough for you to do so. Chances are, this was apparently a science class, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. Chances are there wouldn't have been an opportunity to do so during class. So I'm going to speculate that these occasions when she was checking up with Maddie to find out how her assignments were going would have been as the class was being dismissed. meaning that on those occasions that she was checking up with Maddie about her work, Maddie may have been delayed a little bit getting out of school because her teacher is checking in with her about assignments. Sounds like she's done this a number of times in the past. Has Maddie been late from school, or late getting out, or later I should say, because of teachers following up with her over assignments that haven't been handed in? Because we know she wasn't handing in a lot of assignments. If this is a pattern, then there's probably a pattern of Maddie not getting out immediately when the bell goes, of Maddie being slightly delayed and not being one of the first kids out. Maybe on a day when she hasn't got other delays, she might be one of the first kids out. But if she's got a teacher saying, hang on Maddie, I need to talk to you about your assignments, that's going to put everything behind.
So was that the plan, to get her together, or was it ever discussed that he would get her alone?
The plan was for us to get her together.
So there's a really important question here that I would have liked to have had answered. The question is it normal when Stefan is around for you both to go and pick Maddie up? Because if that is the case, and there's another thing that I'll mention shortly as well. If that is the case, why would Jenn then question if Maddie knew that she was picking her up? And I will play the full pick-up narrative after all these clips, but we know that Jenn said that she drove away because she wondered if perhaps Maddie didn't realise she was being picked up. But she's saying here that her and Stefan had had this conversation where they were going to pick up Maddie together. Now, if it was normal routine for them to pick up Maddie together when Stefan was around, then wouldn't you think that Maddie would be expecting that and would not be getting confused and not knowing whether or not you were picking her up?
All right. So you had just started this job at Disney Coronado Springs like a week or two earlier, is that right?
Yes.
And your sister and other family members would help with Maddie getting to school because of your job?
Yes, my mom and my sister, yes.
Okay. Why is it that now Stefan on February 26th is coming up to help as opposed to any of your family members helping getting Madeline to school?
I had asked for him to come and help me because I think I was working a lot of night shifts or like really late shifts, and I just wanted the opportunity to see Maddie, because I wanted to spend more time with my daughter throughout the week while I was working, versus had she had stayed at my mom's, I wouldn't have seen her all week.
Okay.
So that was just me wanting to see her and spend time with her.
Did Madeline stay at your mom's house fairly frequently?
Every few weekends here and there, like just for the weekend kind of thing.
So at some point in time, the conversation was had that Jenn was getting Stefan to come up from Northport so that she could spend more time with Maddie, meaning that Stefan would be dropping Maddie off at school at various times, and of course, by extension, her wanting to spend more time with Maddie would mean that Maddie would be going home with her after school, right? And she also, when questioned about Maddie staying at her grandmother's house, says that mostly she stays on weekends. Now, the takeaway for me here is that if the conversation has occurred, and it sounds to me like Maddie would have been in on any sort of conversations like this, if the conversation has occurred that Stefan is coming up to help out and to drive Maddie to school occasionally, then you would expect that the conversation had also occurred that meant that Jenn would be also picking Maddie up from school so that she could have time with Maddie after school. Yeah? So for her to be saying, I'm not sure if she realised I was picking her up, to me that sounds like utter BS. Because the rest of the narrative that she's given, even down to that they'd had a conversation the night before about Maddie and Stefan going to McDonald's. She'd had a conversation supposedly with Maddie about Maddie getting ready for school the next day because Stefan would be taking her to school the next day. Wouldn't you also have a conversation with your child over, and then I will be picking you up from school like normal? And then Stefan and I will pick you up from school like normal? I don't buy this BS of her being not sure if Maddie knew that she was picking her up. Because from everything else she's said, it sounds like she's had quite a conversation with Maddie over the routine over these days. So that to me is a concern.
What kind of car you have?
Is it a 4-door, a 2-door, or something else?
It's always parked beside our van.
Yeah, it's always parked beside ours there in the handicap.
In the handicap spot?
Yeah, in the handicap. I
But you know this car to be,
Yes.
As far as we know.
She drives it.
Yeah.
And she's got the handicap sticker.
Right.
I really should have given a shout out to Grizzly at the start of this video, because the majority of the clips that I've used here are actually from Grizzly's videos. So, of course, huge thank you to Grizzly for all her hard work. Now, what's discussed here, and I'll come back to this later on in the video, but what they've talked about here, this is an old couple who live at the complex, and they've basically said that Jenn parks in the disabled parking next to their car. They have been quite clear about that. It's her car. That's where she parks it. So my question is there a spot at the school where there is allocated disabled parking? In which case, would Jenn use that spot rather than sit in the pickup line and have an arrangement with Maddie where she picks Maddie up from there? Or should she need to go into the school at any point in time, would she park in the disabled parking if there was disabled parking available? Something worth considering. Now, my personal experience, I have a parking permit because of ankle reconstruction surgery from last year, which means that sometimes it is a struggle for me to walk long distances, so I got myself a parking permit so I could park close to the stores and not have to try and walk too far on my dodgy ankle. The other week when I picked up my sister from the airport after her trip to New Zealand, I could have sat in the pickup line at the airport, which most of you probably haven't been to Melbourne Airport, but at Melbourne Airport there's a few pickup lines and you actually are stuck in the pickup line until the cars ahead move. But there are pull-offs that are disabled parking. I took advantage of that. Why wouldn't you? If you've got a parking permit that allows you to park in the disabled parking and you're in a situation like that where people behind you are going to expect you to move once you've picked up the person that you are picking up, why wouldn't you slip into the disabled parking?
We're working on getting her school attendance record. I'm just wondering if you being a parent, I would hope that you would know kind of like what her, because I know my daughter's school that if any of them miss one period or 2 periods or something like that, they will call me and say, hey, such and such missed periods. 3 or missed period 7 or something like that?
They don't do that. They send out an email and a voicemail, like an automated voicemail, saying your child was absent today from Hunter's
That's what I just said.
School. But not period 1, 2, 3, and it's not early in the morning like some other states do. It's late in the evening at 5 o'clock, or it's really late.
Totally after the fact.
Yeah, totally after. Like it's.
Have you got a lot of those phone calls of her missing class?
And of course, the typical long pause from Jen. Now, she does say in a few interviews that she got an email from the school about Maddie's absence. So what we are led to believe here is that there is no contact throughout the day regarding absence of students, but that instead there is an email that goes out at the end of the day at around 5 p.m, which notifies parents of an unexplained absence. Because obviously if a child is away sick and the parent has contacted the school and has provided evidence, then they're not going to be doing that email.
And when you get to the school, how do you realize that she wasn't there? So I left for, I usually leave around 2:30 to pick her up. She gets out of school at 4. So I wait it takes me about 20-25 minutes to get to the school, and then I wait about an hour for her to get out. I waited the whole time, and then when the bell rang and then it was time for her to come out, she wasn't one of the first kids like she normally is. And I realized I was holding up the line because everyone behind me had children, and they needed to get out because I was the first in line. So after about, I'm going to say, I think it was like 4:10, she didn't come out and I was holding up the line, so I drove away. I said, maybe I forgot to tell her that I was picking her up that day, because I don't know if she knew that I wasn't working that day. But I had assumed that she thought, she knew that I was going to go get her. So because she never came out, I left and I went. She works less than, I'm going to say it's like a 3-minute drive from the school. It's very close. She works in the Hunters Creek Villages area. I drove that way, and I drove along the path that she would walk, and I didn't see her. And then office, I asked, hey, has she gotten here yet? They said no. And I said, okay, let me wait a little bit. And I parked back again on Hunter's Park Lane, I think. And I waited along that lane to see if I would see her walking. And I didn't see her walking. And it was about 4:30, 4:35. At this point, she should have. So I went back to the office. And then I was like, is she here yet? No, she hasn't gotten here. And I said, okay, hold on. Let me see. I called her best friend. And I was like, hey, are you... I don't know if I told her I was picking her up from school today or to walk to the office, but I don't see her anywhere. And she goes, no, she never came to school today. She didn't come to first or second period. And I said, what do you mean? We dropped her off close to school. She should have walked to school. She goes, no, she never made it to any of her periods. And I said, can you please check with your other friends in your other classes to see if she ever made it? She got back to me and said no. At this point, I started to panic because I realized something was wrong. I emailed one of her teachers, a few of her teachers actually, and one of them responded to me. He said she didn't make it to his period at all, and he checked all her other classes, and she didn't make it to school at all. That's when I knew something was truly wrong, and I'm not before that email or after that email. But I started panicking and freaking out because she should have been to school. She should have made it.
Okay, we've all heard that narrative so many times. But there's a number of things in here that I want to bring up. So first of all, when she talks about waiting, and she wasn't one of the first kids out like she normally is. Now, we're talking about her waiting 6 minutes. Maddie wasn't one of the first kids out. to me, that suggests that perhaps there were still kids coming out of the school at the time that Jenn left. And given that she only waited 6 minutes, seems to me like it would be a given that there were still kids coming out of the school when Jenn left. So why would you go? Why would you leave if there are still kids coming out? Why would you not think that there could have been a reason why your child was delayed? And I've gone through several reasons why Maddie could have been delayed. I don't buy this thing of I was holding up the line, because what school is going to have that kind of system where the car at the front is going to hold up the whole line and the other cars can't get around? That does not make sense whatsoever. And in a minute I will be showing you Hunters Creek Middle School from like Google Images to show you that that was not the case. Now, we've covered that she only waited 6 minutes after waiting a full hour there. So it's not like she couldn't have been patient and waited another 20 minutes. Talked about her being not one of the first kids, so I left. Like, what? You weren't holding up the line, because clearly the arrangement would be that they have a setup that cars can get around the cars that are waiting. I don't buy her story of maybe I forgot to tell her, because like I said, we've got this whole narrative of, for starters, Stefan coming to help her with Maddie through the week so she can spend more time with Maddie. We've got the whole narrative of her supposedly preparing Maddie for school the night before, saying, make sure you've got your drink bottle in your bag and get your clothes out. Clearly, that's bullshit if you ask me, but anyway. And then you've got the narrative there of, and we had the conversation about Stefan taking her to school and him buying her macas along the way. Well, wouldn't part of the conversation be, and then I'll pick you up after school at the normal time, at the normal place? It just does not ring true to me. Now, the other thing that I have issues with is her claiming that the panic didn't set in until after she'd had a conversation with Maddie's friend and had responses from the teachers saying that Maddie wasn't there. Well, I'm sorry, but you're telling me that after 20 minutes of no sign of your child, you needed confirmation first before you would start to panic? I don't buy that either. And this driving around, oh, I left the school and then I drove to the office and then I drove back to this laneway and I parked there to see if she's coming. That's not logical behaviour. If you've been a dumbass like Jenn and left the school after 6 minutes and gone to the mother's office, if the standing arrangement is that when you are not picking up your child, that your child goes to your mother's office, wouldn't you just wait there for the child to arrive? Why would you feel the need to double back and look for her along the route that she would walk to get to the office? Because that implies that you are believing that she's going to be on that route, meaning that she would get to the office at the normal time that she would get to the office. Why would you need to leave the office? Surely if you've made the mistake of being such a dumbass that after 6 minutes you thought your kid wasn't coming, so you've gone to your mother's office, well then clearly if you're thinking that you've somehow missed her coming out, you would wait. What difference would it make between waiting at the office or waiting en route to the office? Because either way, if that's what you believe is the case, that the child is headed to the office, that's where she's going to end up. This woman is so dense, it just does my head in. Personally, I think that part of it was her putting on a show for her own family. If she did go to her mother's office, then probably she was putting on a show by heading back out again to go back for Maddie, supposedly. That's my opinion, because none of what she has said here sounds logical to me. Now, I'm going to replay 2 bits from that part of the narrative. And I had missed this previously, but it's significant. So listen really closely to what Jenn is actually saying in these 2 clips.
So after about, I'm gonna say, I think it was like 4:10, she didn't come out and I was holding up the line, so I drove away. So because she never came out, I left and I went.
Okay, so does Jenn say, because I didn't see her come out, I did these things, I left? No, she doesn't. She says, she didn't come out, so I left. And then, the second time round, she says, because she never came out. To me, that's a major slip up there. Once you could possibly be like, okay, twice so, there's leakage happening here, guilty leakage. Maddie never came out of the school. No, she never came out of the school because Maddie never went into the school. Jenn is acknowledging here that Maddie never came out of the school. She's not suggesting that I must have missed seeing her come out. No, she's saying Maddie never came out. And yet then she goes on with heading to her mother's place looking for her and ringing blah 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 blah. That is a huge slip up to me, and it definitely sounds to me like leakage, an admission of guilt. She knew Maddie was not coming out of the school that day. Now, let's start by having a look at the Google image of Hunters Creek Middle School. Okay, I will zoom in momentarily, and apologies to people who are watching this on a phone because it does make it a bit more challenging when I'm showing you panned out like this. But you can see that in front of the school you have those loops. You have that pickup loop. And it is a full loop. But look closely, there's parking spots off that loop. There's also a big spot that's got those lines on it that's a blocked out, don't stop here. But you can see that there are cars that have actually pulled off to the side there. Not in actual parking spaces, but they're pulled off to the side. Now I'm going to go in closer and show you a few more things. Well, would you look at that? Right within sight of the pedestrian crossing, right near the front of the school, there are 3 disabled parking spots right there. Jenn had the option of pulling into the disabled parking. As for the width of the pickup line, you can see the width of it compared to the cars that are actually there in the image. There was more than enough room for cars to drive around those cars that were still waiting. No school is going to have a pickup lane that is set up in such a way that you have this major bottleneck of cars where nobody can move until they leave in the precise order. That is ridiculous. Can you imagine the amount of fuss that would occur if a school had a system like that? Now, I could see those two widened sections also out the front of the school there. I'm not familiar with American schools, obviously, but looking at those, they look to me to be bus pickup spots. Presumably, they're not going to have the buses picking the kids up out on the road, so the bus kids are also going to be using that same area to get on the buses. It doesn't seem to me like that area at the back would be used as a bus pickup area because it is all that angled parking. It certainly wouldn't be practical. So it seems to me that the buses would leave from the front of the school. Let me know if you think that's not the case. But it certainly seems to me that the bus pickup area would also be at the front of the school. They're not going to make buses wait for parents' cars to move, for the buses to leave, because they've got a whole busload of kids to drop off home. They have a schedule to keep to. You can also see, like I said, you've got that big spot where you could slip off to the side. You've got parking spots all along the side there where you could stop and park if you needed to do so. But most importantly, she says Maddie never came out of the school. So shouldn't she have gone into the disabled parking or slipped off to the side somewhere there and gone in and looked for her? What she has described does not fit with what we are seeing here. Okay, so I'm going to move on. I'm going to look at newsletters and parent handbooks. Okay, so this was one of the first newsletters, beginning of the new year newsletter, putting all the reminders in, and where I put the two highlighted lines in between there. Please remember that all parents picking up their students must drive through the car line. Also, only a right turn is allowed when you exit the school to Townley Boulevard. Through the car line. That means to me that it is, that implies to me it is something that is moving. You go through the car line. I know that's probably just me looking at the language and perhaps I'm misinterpreting it. But to me, that gives me the sense of a flow of traffic. You go through the car line. You don't stop and wait in the car line. You go through the car line. You're in the car line, pick up your child, then you keep going. Let me know how you interpret it though. I would be very curious to know how other people have interpreted that. I will note the paragraph above basically says that pickup is between 4:04 and 4:30. So she had plenty of time, had she truly been the dumbass that she believes she was and gone to her mother's place. She had plenty of time. Her mother only lived 3 minutes away. So had she left at 4:10, got to her mother's house, mother's office, found out Maddie was there, she could have been back there by 4:15 to go in and ask about Maddie. Although, like I said, why you wouldn't just wait at the grandmother's office, having already gone and left, is beyond me. But why not also ring the school immediately at 4:15 when she walked into her mother's office? None of what she says she did makes any sense. Just reiterating what we already know, where it's highlighted, students are dismissed at 4:04 p.m. Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays and Fridays. 4:04, meaning that Jenn waited 6 minutes only for her child to come out of the school before she left. But, you know, since she said she never came out, well, clearly waiting 6 minutes to me sounds like she knew that she wasn't going to come out. Now, I hadn't put all this together before because this is not a system that I am familiar with or had any understanding of. But if you recall, in one of Jenn's interviews, she actually said, and she's only said it the once, that they called Maddie over the PA. Now, what it says here in this handbook, parents on the car loop will always have the car rider tag visible so that the car rider staff can call for the student or students. Now, presumably, that must be some kind of digitised thing, because I would imagine that in a school with 800 students, that the staff, the car rider staff, aren't going to be like, well, there's Jen Soto with her tag on her car. I know that's Madeline Soto. They're not going to know the specific parents, the specific child. Obviously, the system has to be streamlined somehow. So it must be that there must be some sort of scanner or something that at some point scans the tag on the car so that they know which parents are there, and then the students can be called if the parents are still waiting. Please help me out with this and explain if that is the case. I did see a comment somewhere where someone said that if a parent is waiting for a while, that they have to display a tag or something, and that, you know, the kids would be called if they are late to the line or something. So, is this what she was talking about when she said that they called Maddie over the PA? Is this why she went to the school? To make it sound like she had no idea that Maddie was not there? Because that would be so convenient, wouldn't it? To be at the front of the line so you can be seen by everyone waiting for your child who never went to school. But not only that, you've got a tag on your car. So when your child doesn't come out, there's going to be an announcement so people can even hear your child being called to the car line, which makes you look totally innocent because you expected your child to be at school, right? So I really, really don't believe any of this BS with the pickup. You don't go and wait 6 minutes only for your child. She's acknowledged that Maddie never came out. Maddie never came out and left, and yet you left? Explain that. And as for Jen's story that she went back to the school and it was all locked up and there was no one around, let's talk about the after school club, boys and girl club. The program starts right after school until 6 p.m. If you need childcare for after school, please sign up for this. Well, that to me infers that, like most after school programs, the kids are there up until the point when their parents pick them up. It's not like they have to stay there till 6 p.m, but that they are there until their parents are able to pick them up. There was another newsletter, an early start of the year newsletter, where they were talking about how the buses were going to run late in the first week of school, so that they were expecting the bus kids to go to after school boys and girls club before catching the bus. What does this mean? This means that there would have been people coming and going from the school up until 6 p.m. There would have been people at the school up until 6 p.m. And yet Jenn claims that when she went back at around 4:30 or whenever it was she says she went back, that there was nobody there and it was all dark and locked up. I don't buy that at all. I don't believe that she actually did go back to the school. I would be curious to see security footage from the school, like camera footage, but we know that that's not going to be released. Admittedly, I can see why they wouldn't release the initial footage, because they can't release camera footage of hundreds of children, hundreds of minors going out and getting in cars. They just can't do that. They're not going to release, they couldn't redact something like that because of all the children in it. The latter one, possibly they could release it if there were no other people or children in it, but I don't think they will, because it is my strong belief that they've held on to all this stuff to do with Jenn for a good reason. There's a good reason why we don't see all the detailed information about Jenn's movements, Jenn's phone calls, Jenn's Google Drive. All these things that they did actually do warrants on. There's a good reason why we're not being seeing these things, why they're not being released. And I believe that there will actually be charges for Jenn, based on the absence of things that have been released, which includes the absence of any details regarding her story to do with the school pickup. The only thing we have is that image showing basically from the cell tower that she was there. Now here's a nice little tidbit for you, directly from the parent handbook from Hunters Creek Middle School. So directly from Maddie's school. And this is about the morning school messenger call. Remember the detective asked Jenn about the similar thing? Well, this was in the handbook. The district has developed a new attendance school messenger notification to parents. This notification will not take the place of the existing call parents receive during the early evening regarding attendance. This new notification will be an additional call that will inform parent that your child was in attendance at the start of school. Really bad grammar there, but they need to fix that clearly. Teachers will have until 10:29 a.m. to enter attendance in Skyward, and you will receive a call at 11:05 a.m. Now, I've tried to backtrack and find out when this was introduced. The parent handbook doesn't have a line at the bottom saying when it was updated, so I don't know when this was brought in. I've gone back through all the school newsletters and I haven't seen mention of it in the school newsletters going back since before Maddie went missing, let's say. So I can't tell you if this was in place when Maddie went missing or if this was something that was brought in afterwards. But it is worth considering, was this in place at the time? Like I said, I can't definitively say if this was in place at the time. And I would be curious if there is anyone who can find this out, let me know. But it certainly raises more questions. Now, obviously, when it comes to the school pickup, we can only speculate, unless Jenn turns around and says, it was all an act to make it look like I didn't know that my daughter was deceased. Then we can only speculate on that fact. But when we look at the totality of things regarding the school pickup, to me it just looks like it was a complete act. She was doing it to be seen. She was doing it to make it look like she expected her daughter to have been at school. But it is such a red flag when she says, because she never came out, I left. Well, if your child never came out, wouldn't you be pulling over somewhere and going in to get them? Not going, well, it's been 6 minutes, my child never came out, okay, I'm going now. That is complete and utter BS. I really feel that this whole school narrative just does not fit at all. I'd love to hear what everyone else thinks about this, but the more I think about it, the more aggravated I feel. Because it seems to me like it was just a big act. If you can think of any good reasons why she needed to leave after 6 minutes, and why, when she said she never came out, that she would have left, let me know, because I'm really struggling with that. So, thanks for listening. If you are new, please subscribe. Also, please hit the like button and please leave a comment below. I love reading everyone's comments. I love when you challenge me on things and make me rethink my own ideas or make me think why I think these things that I do. This is how we find the truth. When we challenge each other, logically, not when we're being trolls, of course, but, you know, open discussion is how we figure things out. And that's what's happening here on my channel, and I'm loving it. So, thanks to everyone who does engage in the chat section. You guys are fantastic. So thanks, and I'll catch you in the next one.